Thank you. So, welcome everyone, and welcome to the Danube Institute this afternoon for this much anticipated discussion about the place of Christianity in the survival of the West with Eduard Habsburg, a renowned diplomat and author, and with Raymond Ibrahim, renowned historian and author of several books about this very topic, basically. They are both well-known public figures of how Christianity fits in our present moment and how it figured in our past. So join with us in this discussion. The format is the same as it's in the Danube Institute, 60 minutes of discussion with the gentlemen, and then we will open up the floor for around 20 minutes of discussion. And then you can pose your questions and hopefully get answers. And so let's begin. First, I need to note that this event is actually a launch for one of our papers, because at the Danube Institute we are doing a lot of papers, I think each 1 week, this paper is not surprisingly, The Place of Christianity in the Survival of the West by Ian McGilchrist. And this paper is actually a paper form of a speech that he delivered on a Danube Institute conference in Oxford a couple of months ago. So with this, I will turn to our discussants and pose the not so surprising question, that's how do you imagine the place of Christianity in the survival of the West, in the future and in the present? So, Raymond, if you start.
Well, the way I imagine it is primarily from a historical prism, and the long and short of it, based on that historical prism, is that the West is Christianity, because it has been historically. I've always found it interesting that today it's called the West, because it's kind of strange. Every other civilization is named after a religion or a philosophy, so the Islamic world, Hinduism, and now we're just a geographical direction, so it's kind of odd. It used to be the Christian world, Christendom, and so forth, so I think it was pivotal to what we have today, but what has happened is that there's been all these philosophies that have thought they can extrapolate essentially the boons or the good things out of Christianity and turn them into their own standalone things, and then the skeletal frame of Christianity it becomes dispensable. It's superfluous. It's just a husk. I think this is the mentality, and I think that what we're seeing is the exact opposite. That in as much as you do that, things are starting to fall apart. We were talking, but one of the convictions that I have is that there is no such thing as a secular society. And even though the West claims to be secular, what it is you turn your back on one God only to embrace another. And it may not have a name of a God or be an actual deity, but it is in one way or the other, whether you look at it as money or worldly concepts, and that's what you give all of your attention to. And this is why, you look at the first commandment of the 10 Commandments is to love God with all your mind and heart. To me, that was always a little weird, but it sort of makes sense, because that which you love then really dominates you. And if you love other things that are finite, unlike God, then they take you down the wrong path. So that's just a little preamble, and I will submit to Mr. Habsburg.
Yeah, basically the West used to be a Christian continent for 1,600, 700 years, more or less. What we are living now is the weird situation. And for me, it's an image a bit like in The Lord of the Rings, when you're one of the hobbits at the beginning of the first volume, and you wander across the landscape of Middle-earth in your part of the world, and you find sort of the last remains of little castles and fortifications along the route, and oh, there was a king once, and there were great empires here, and it's all gone. So I see the so-called West as a place that is like a desert today. in a reality where there used to be gardens and waters and rivers and life. We now have a desert, and we are being told that this is the good thing. We finally come to the place where humanity needs to go, a neutral, secular world, balanced. We're being told that it's good that politicians don't show their faith, don't have a faith. The more balanced and neutral they are, the better. It's good that the religion is not too present in the public space. That's good. But as you said before, Reverend, it doesn't correspond to human nature. Already Aristotle says, more or less in a way, that we are helplessly transcendent. We are built for faith. And for the last nearly 2 millennia, Europe was a Christian continent. Now it isn't anymore, and we try to make sense of what's going on around us and how we can get from here to something good again, because that's what we're talking about today.
Thank you. I think your example about the hobbits wandering out Middle Earth and seeing all these great empires and like the husks of it is really apt, and it sounds like you both imagine Christianity as kind of the default state of the West, and I think it invites the question just to understand, to move forward later. How are we moving out of it? Where did it went sideways in a sense? Because we were like Christian civilization in several churches for 1500 years, 1600 years, but as many materialistic historians say that it was natural because we are moved beyond that, like evolutionary phases, like Fukuyama would put it, or like Hegel or something. There is like thesis, there's antithesis, and then we are moving forward to something beyond Christianity. So why do you think it's not natural? So to address this question of that we moved, we are off the path somehow of Western civilization. We are off the path of Christianity.
So you want to know why we are where we are now? What happened?
So why do you think that?
What went awry, basically, like how it got wrong?
Yes, absolutely.
Well, I would say a series of heavy hitters like Renaissance/Enlightenment, French Revolution, the 60s. The 60s play a surprising role. If you look at the world before the 60s, this was still largely a Christian world. And since then, a lot of it went away. Also, the churches have lost their strong presence and moral voice since the 1960s. I believe this is a bit a result of what happened around Vatican II, the idea that the churches should strongly embrace the modern world as it is today and encourage it and get into a close-up dialogue with the modern world. While the churches before, as Christians, we always believed that the Christian fights against the world, the devil, and the flesh. That was basically the very simple catechism for every Christian, was you fight against these things. Somewhere in the 60s, we decided that the world was good and needed to be embraced, that the devil didn't exist, and therefore sinfulness didn't exist, and man wasn't broken. And the flesh, the church suddenly became cool and said, we're not prudish anymore. We're not so distant anymore. So all these things happened somewhere in the 60s. And that's about 70 years ago, 60, 70 years ago. That's where we are right now. So, and that explains a lot. What do you say?
I agree by and large with everything you said, but I think there's another element that most people don't see, and it's a very subtle one. It's ultimately theological. And it's the sort of, the privatization or atomization of Christianity into this individual thing that exists in the individual's mind. It's an abstract idea, it's a theory, it's a scriptural formulation, it's John 3:16, and I just say something, and then that's the end of it. Now I can just get by and live in a perfectly secular lifestyle. I think that kind of, oversimplified theology has done great mischief because it implies, and I see this all the time with Christians who think this, that Christianity begins and ends with just this personal relationship I have with Jesus Christ, and that's it. I'm saved. I'm going to heaven. And that is, you won't find that before the modern era in any historical text. No Christian thought that way. So this is definitely a new phenomena, and from it, like I said, all sorts of problems have arisen because that is the number one way that essentially the idea of Christendom has been truncated. Because now it's just, it's in your mind, you and Jesus are good and you have your idea and that's it, you're saved. And now submit to the secular rule, which, as I pointed out earlier, is not really secular because everyone has gods. So I think that particular idea, which is very subtle and insidious, has completely permeated so many Christian thinking, and along with everything that Edward said, really exacerbates it.
Thank you. As far as I see, you are basically saying that the West gave the wrong ideas or gave the wrong answer to, or the church gave the wrong answer to modernity, like church as, as a community of Christians, the body of Christ, maybe, if you can pose it that way. So gave the wrong answer to modernity in a way? What do you think? So like we always gave the kind of the good answers for like 1600 years, but then we kind of lost track in like 60 years.
It seems to me the church, when you speak about it, is doing everything possible to concede and appease the world and be one with the world, which is exactly not its vocation. It's supposed to be against the world. I mean, this is everywhere in the biblical and church teaching. So I think when you go to a church and all they're trying to do is actually conform to the world because they want to win over whatever worshipers, which is ridiculous because it doesn't even work that way. But I think that is definitely one of the ways that the church itself is essentially committing suicide.
I would also say that in a way we have come back from 1,500 years of the Constantinian era, where the church was a respected partner in society, for long stretches of time was also leading the way in many ways. Now you would see the representatives of the church, especially the bishops, in a very timid position. And I've worked for a Catholic bishop in Austria for 5 years as a spokesman. And I learned what the idea among church representatives in the West is right now. The only thing that should never happen is a shitstorm in the media. That's the worst thing that can happen. Shitstorm, so you can never say anything that could lead to a shitstorm. Now, can you imagine how you could speak about the very controversial truths of the Catholic Church, for instance, without causing a shitstorm? So every bishop is already auto-censoring himself with everything he says. And bishops didn't used to be that way. So the church is in a very cautious and hidden. So bishops can't do that. On the other hand, we live in a time where lay people can do this. And I believe that when we speak about the question is, can Christianity be a strong element in the West? Can we have Christian countries and a Christian continent again? Yes, we may, and not exactly through the hierarchy of the church. I believe that we live in a time where every single Christian can be a light to the world, as it has never been before. 30, 40 years ago, if you wanted to speak about your faith to many people, you had to convince a newspaper to write an article, or you had to convince a TV station to give you a stage to speak about your faith. Nowadays, as they say, every dad with a webcam, every influencer can speak about their Catholic faith and can convince and win over many, many, many young people. The reason why all over Europe young people are coming back to the church, grown-ups are getting baptized, confirmed, or returned to the Catholic Church is because, and that's my theory, I can't prove it and I haven't written on it, because people discover the greatness, the glory, and the reality of the faith in the internet. They follow influencers who speak why they are Catholic, why they are Protestant, devout, strong believers, and people get this unfiltered. In your normal parish, you don't encounter this stuff. And in the past, it used to be part of what the church taught. Nowadays, the church has become very cautious, but the single Christian can reach out and can be a light for the world. So, in a way, this gives me a lot of hope, because it's episodical proof, but I'm on X, very active on Twitter, very active, spend far too much time if you ask my wife and children. And I watch every Easter Sunday. I watch the photographs from all over the world. I've become Catholic. I've been baptized. I've got confirmation in the Easter Vigil. And the numbers were growing, but in the last 2 or 3 years, they exploded through the roof. Thousands of people everywhere returning to the church. I don't think that is a sudden reawakening of the church hierarchy. I think this is exactly coinciding with the moment that everybody is used to watching 3, 4, 5, 6 influencers on their phone. That wasn't possible even 10 years ago. Most people still watched these things on their computers. Now everybody is watching and following several people. My children do that. My wife does it. And this is something new. And I believe this is a place where God works into our world, and a surprising place. I didn't expect that. The internet is supposed to be a terrible place. It isn't. It isn't.
Thanks. So we are already on the part of how are we getting back on, like, the, as you say, the good paths of Western civilization. And I would like Raymond to comment on that, if you are seeing the same thing, like same processes.
I am seeing the same thing, and basically, like Edward said, it's not coming from the official channels, it's not from the church, it's not from the people who represent Christianity, because they're part of the problem, as I tried to delineate it earlier. And frankly, the kind of Christianity that they represent is a turnoff to most people. It really is. It's just essentially secular humanism with, theological garb. And and it's just, and I'll explain to you why I say that, because I myself was always, not interested in, and it has this, I've tried to coin this word, doormat Christianity, where it's like it coalesces into, all you have to do is just be a doormat and never, never judge, never be confrontational, never say anything, a good Christian, just lay down, let everyone walk all over you. And that's sort of like the popular form of Christianity. And it's also easy to do. And you can pat yourself on the back and say, look, I'm virtuous because I don't do anything. But anyway, that is actually, I think, quite the turnoff to a lot of people. And I know this, and I'll tell you why, because I write books about history, and I talk about things like crusaders and medieval Christians, and they're doing very well. And you have no idea how many times I'll get emails from random, especially young people, who will tell me that I found my Christian faith through your book, which blows me away, because I don't see myself as a proselytizer. It's a history. And I'm not even being clever. I'm putting large excerpts from primary sources. Okay, but so my point is, when people see the actual history, how it was, how Christians truly were, that actually inspires them. And that's what they want to become. And that's why I believe there is something of a move backwards, or back to reclaiming that kind of Christianity. And that is why the internet, you're right, it could be a dodgy place, but in this case, it's also helpful.
Very interesting. So you are saying that church hierarchies are kind of fading away, in a way, or like...
Irrelevant.
No, not fading away. But not doing a very good job in being fiery apostles right now, because of historic reasons. They will get there again, but right now, it's a bit weak sauce. I think the temptation for the churches in Western countries is to say to the state, be nice to us, and we give you the meaning source over your secular world. We give a bit of religious source to your stuff, and then people will be happy. And that's our role in the state. I always tell people, the role of the church is not to make the state and the world a better place. That was not what Christ taught us to do. The role of the church is to teach people that the center of their life should be Christ, should be God, and your life here on earth is to get to know God, love God, and be with Him one day in heaven. That's the only job of the church. And they're not doing it right now very, very loudly. They will get there again. I don't think they fade away. No, I believe that the church and the churches will find their center again. It will come from below. It will come from the faithful. It's basically, and that's why if you ask me the path forward, what can, for instance, a state do to help to get Christianity back? I don't think that Christianity can be state mandated. It doesn't work. But what I believe the state can do is help families. I believe that families are right now the nuclear power cell that will bring Christianity back to Europe. It's the families. As we both now saw that the church hierarchy is not right now the power cell doing this. Families are. Families are the place where you get to know your faith from childhood on, where you see the example of your parents. If you're lucky enough to have many siblings, I have 6 children. There is someone sitting over there that has more than 6 children. A large family is a place where you learn your faith, all the virtues to be a good member of society, but most of all the faith. This happens in the families. And if the state helps and encourages families to have lots of children, then this is the best investment into a better future and into a more Christian future. That's what Hungary, in a way, has been trying to do over the last years with its financial aid and other things for families. But again, you cannot mandate faith. And I believe the step from having 2.5 to 3 children to having 6 like me or 10 like you, 11, sorry, children, faith is the difference. And that's why I always say our continent would be a better place if many, many people would live their Christian faith, because you would have healthier and happier families, you would have more children, you wouldn't have the need to call many, many, many migrants to solve our demographical problems. A Christian Europe would solve so many of these problems. Yeah.
I'm in complete agreement. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's actually a really interesting point that you brought up, that Christian Europe would be a much happier place, and also like about it cannot be state mandated, which is also a very good thing, because Central Europe, that then like the 5 very historical churches would come, that like which is the dominant one, but then but my question is also, my point is about you say there are these emerging social media based, partly social media based movements that you are seeing. Do you see that they are preferring a specific denomination or the group of denominations, and what does it mean for for like the wide scale of churches that we have right now in the West? We have like, I don't know how many hundreds of Christian groups right now. Yeah.
Can I quickly add to what I said before about what's going on right now? So yes, it's true, people discover the richness of the Christian faith online, but they don't remain there. They don't form churches in the internet. They will find their way to a concrete church place in their area. They will look for something, because part of our Christian faith is we live our faith in a communitarian way. We have the sacraments. We want to go to church. We want to go to mass. We want to pray together. So people will discover it in the internet, but then they will come to concrete church. I mean, if I would take a wild step, I would say Catholic is growing exponentially. I don't know how it is in the States, but in Europe, for instance, in England, very happy. I have one daughter now who's married in England, and she says Catholics popping out everywhere, all over the aisles. Catholic parishes, Catholic prayer places coming out. Some people joke in England, because the Church of England is in a rather bad place right now. As a high prelate of the Catholic Church, which I won't quote with name here, said to me, it's going down in flames right now. And some people say that in one generation, England will be Catholic and Muslim. What do you think?
Yeah, especially about what you said about the Anglican Church. That's, to me, is the perfect example of that sort of Christianity that has lost all vibrancy and is just it's the Church of nice secularism, but we call ourselves Christian. But all our values, all our metaphysical truths are essentially one with secular humanism. So I think that's why it's failing. I also agree with you. I think by and large, I've seen both. It seems that the one demographic or denomination that's shrinking is the Protestants, and because a lot of them are becoming Catholics or Orthodox, actually, both of them.
In Europe or in the world, in America?
In America too, yeah.
Shrinking?
Yeah. It seems that way. It seems the only vibrant form of Protestantism now is evangelical Protestantism. Other than that, the mainstream, as they call them, or mainline, are rather moribund in nature. And again, every Christian, I always meet young, fiery Christians who are Catholic mostly or Orthodox, and all of them are converts. None of them were born into the faith. And that itself is interesting because it, again, presupposes that religion isn't just some abstract ideology that I derive from the Bible. It actually has a historical precedent and a sort of communal or shared memory that strikes a chord with people. So I think that's one of the other reasons they're gravitating back there.
Can I say something about the communal memory? Of course, I'm a member of the Habsburg family. And as you know, I've written a few books about my family and the value of the Habsburgs. And I wrote, for instance, about Emperor Leopold I, who saw it as his duty to, with his entire court, to live all the Christian feasts publicly. And the entire court had to live them with them, and the entire population followed along. So we had political leaders who felt that their primary duty was to be Christian examples. If you go through Vienna and you come to the Pestsäule, you know, this beautiful column that was put there by the emperor because the last plague was ended in Austria. If you go closer and just don't look at the beautiful statues and the clouds and all of that, you will see 2 or 3 long texts written by the emperor praying for his people, praying God to lead his people to a deeper faith. That was a political leader in the 17th, 18th century. And even more so, the Habsburgs not only did that in the center of Vienna, but they ordered every small village and town to have such devotional places in the center of the village where people can walk by every day and learn about their faith. So there was a time where the political leaders, parenthesis the emperors, felt responsible for the good well-being, religious well-being of their people. Now we are very far away from that, and barring some sort of crazy miracle that would bring back a Catholic monarchy, which we don't have right now. The monarchies we have right now are very, very far away from what I just described. I don't see this happening. On the contrary, one always says that if a political leader is neutral and non-religious, it's better. Yeah.
Yeah. What he said. No, I mean, unless you want to re-articulate the point.
Yeah, actually, I wanted to pose this point to you as well. That can you point to like a specific era or historical event in Christian history? You write about a lot of Christian history and history of Christendom. That is like an example to you. How should the political community, the society, or generally face the challenges that we have right now?
Well, yeah, the Christian history is littered with examples that show you how Christian cohesive and communal cooperation was key and fundamental to its survival. We can begin with the monks who actually preserved all the knowledge during the Germanic, barbarian invasions, the fall of Rome, and it was Christians. and they weren't and they weren't they weren't just fanatical Christians burning Plato and just saving the Bible. They were open-minded. They saved the classics. They the law and philosophy. That's how it existed. But you can even when you look at it in the context of my field, warfare, medieval warfare, the Crusades and all that. Well, Islam, in as much as it was quite the behemoth at certain periods of time, what gave an identity to the people of Europe wasn't nationalism. It wasn't their language. It was their Christian identity. This is why they fought to the death under extreme circumstances. When your ancestors came and took over the Roman Empire, the barbarians, what's interesting is they assimilated into the Christian world, right? And because they obviously saw its natural appeal, while their own animistic type pagan religion wasn't that appealing. The Mongols had the same sort of experience with other religions. But when Muslims came to the Christian West, Christians didn't give in. They wanted to maintain it. So once again, you see there was a fierce clinging to their identity, and their identity began and ended with being Christian. And one final example is all the warfares that they had. This will make you happy, the Battle of Lepanto, where I believe this gentleman's ancestor was at. This is at a time now, 1571, and the Ottoman Empire is this massive behemoth. And what was the collective identity? What got these Catholic maritime states to actually go to war? It was their religious identity that held them together. So, and this is also why, if you look at today, there is no religious identity in Europe, and that's why they're being run roughshod by everyone, because they don't have an identity, and if you don't have an identity or confidence in something that you want to preserve, well then, then when that person comes who does have a civilizational identity, he's going to take over, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Can I add to that right now? What we have right now, and it's also the main problem with the arrival of Islam in Europe right now. Islam tried several times. Islam is back now, and it's now faced with a Europe that has no Christian identity and doesn't even know how to deal with a religion that is aggressive and doesn't want to integrate. Because even non-religious politicians in Europe are used to Christianity. Christianity tries not to disturb, tries to fit in really well into the democratic system, tries to be invisible. And now you have people from a religion that say, we don't care about your Western values. We are strong in our faith. We do our own laws. We do the Sharia. What are you going to do about it? They don't know what they're going to do about it because they don't have an identity for which they fight. Vaguely Western civilizational values or something like that, or diversity, which is our strength, as we know. But there is no real answer to that. So, as I said, it's a very weak continent that is faced with this problem, but they don't have the tools to deal with a strong and sometimes aggressive religion.
And the irony of what we're talking about is that if you go in the past, as I was talking about, when they did have that identity, the Battle of Lepanto and all that sort of thing, they were literally a lot weaker militarily, even economically, against these massive sultanates like the Ottomans. And they managed to win. Now look at Europe, which is militarily, economically, technologically much more advanced than the Muslim world. And these destitute migrants who come cap in hand are taking over and terrorizing them. So there's a certain paralysis that's going on right now, because how can something that is so powerful materially, which is to say the modern West, be so easily cowed and terrorized by something that is so weak? And it really comes down to just the conviction. It has no conviction, so it just capitulates. And whereas the weak, outnumbered migrant Muslim, he still has a belief, and that actuates him.
This may be the moment to tell my story that I told in our interview. It was very interesting. And then he began rambling. So, when I arrived in Rome as ambassador of Hungary to the Holy See, that was in a very special moment of history. It was in the summer of 2015. And that was when daily up to 10,000 migrants crossed the green border from Serbia to Hungary to get into the heart of Europe, without passports, without any regulation. And when the Hungarian government decided to build up a fence to stop that and control it, also it being the outer border of the Schengen area into which these people entered. And when I arrived in Rome, after having myself helped here with the refugees and the migrants in Budapest, the Pope made speeches against people who build fences against refugees, and that's not Christian and all that. So that was a very amusing moment in time to be the ambassador of Hungary to the Holy See. And I remember at the first cocktails, where we went as ambassadors, there was always one prelate of the Holy See, which I will not name by name, who came up to me and says, Hungary building fences against migrants, not good. And so after the third time he said that in front of other people, I said, I'm going to visit him and talk it out with him. And I visited him because as a diplomat, you're allowed to visit every head of dicastery. He was a head of dicastery, I won't say which. And so I sat down with him, we had a coffee, and I said, so tell me, what do you think of Islam? And he said, it's very dangerous. I said, really? He said, very dangerous. I've been to Beirut and other places. While they're in minority, they are friendly. In the moment they have majority, they will suppress all other religions. I said, really? And then I said, but how could we integrate the Muslims in Europe then? You can't integrate them. I said, why? He said, they don't want to be integrated. It doesn't work at all. So I said, well, please tell me. If Islam, in your eyes, is something dangerous, and you don't see a chance of integrating it into Europe, why do you want millions of them to come into the heart of Europe? And how will that work out? And then he was silent for a few seconds because he probably saw the problem there. And then he said in a rather weak voice, well, I hope they lose their faith when they're in Western Europe. That was his answer. And that's, of course, exactly the contrary of what happens, right?
The exact opposite happens. That's why often Muslim terrorists are second, third, fourth generations. It's like the more they're actually assimilated or around this culture, the more it radicalizes them because for the very reasons we're discussing, because it offers nothing. And so they fall back to their own heritage and their own culture, which is inherently militant. So it's a very dangerous tonic.
I'm a moderator here, but I dare say to insert a short story about, how to integrate Muslims, maybe. In a way, when you travel to Belarus or to Lithuania, you still see like these little mosques around small villages. They are the mosques of the now mostly disappeared Lipka Tatars, who were Muslim subjects of the Polish Catholic king. Up until the Russians take over, and so very interesting historical examples of the history of Christendom all around. That's
speaking as a Habsburg, I can say that in the Austro-Hungarian army, you not only had priests and pastors, but you also had imams and you had rabbis for the different faiths of the monarchy. It is possible.
Sorry.
It is possible to integrate Islam. It has happened already, but that's probably a different situation now than what it was, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Until that, I will pose, as we talked about, integrations of Muslims and future of Europe and what will happen. The question of how do you see Christendom or like the West, whichever it is, in like 10 years? Do you see positive tendencies as you see it, or what do you see for like the predicted future of Christianity in the West? Or is it like a relevant question at all?
I'm not in the business of prognosticating or telling futures, but I can take a guess, I suppose. And I think what we were talking about might happen, which is, you know, the sincere seekers for truth, and there are many, will find it one way or the other. And the ones who are in the officialdom will start sort of fading away. I mean, they'll still be there, but they just won't have the authority. And I think we're already there, that so many people just are finding their own way to Christianity. And it's not through the official channels, the official churches of oftentimes most of, if not all of the denominations. So I think that will go, but I'll reserve my answer as to how to bring it about. Yeah.
Yes, as I said before, I believe that the power cell for this is the family. If children grow up with a faith in a family and they experience faith lived by their parents, they experience their mother praying the rosary with them, they experience the father queuing up for confession in the church, they experience that the first reaction of the family to a difficult situation is not debating what to do, but to pray together. If you experience that at home and you're part of a large family, this will not easily be taken away from you. This is the way that Christian faith was always for centuries. It was a natural part of life, and the most important thing, in my family, in the Habsburg family, if you look through my books, you will see that they were always looking at death. They were always knowing that one day they will have to meet God, and that nowadays we believe that everybody goes to heaven because every priest in every funeral always says he's with God now. But I always say, how do you know that? As Christians, we believe there's a dramatic possibility that you could not be with God after death. And if you really believe that, although churches don't like to speak about that possibility because it's not nice and cuddly, if you believe that, then your life is a dramatic place where you have to really get to know God and His plan for your life, and you have to put them into the center. This all you can learn in a family. And I believe that if you have children of that kind, those children will one day marry people with the same values, and this is how the church will grow again, and then we'll have good and strong bishops who speak out about their faith, and then things may change. But honestly, all of the things that I'm now glowingly describing to you are tiny in the eyes of the world, tiny numbers, but very strong numbers. And around these strong numbers, growth will happen, and strong growth will happen, and not lukewarm growth. That's how I see it.
It's also interesting, though, what you say, which I agree with, is the exact opposite of what I was describing the situation is, which is this sort of individual Christianity, atomized and, you know, turned into an abstract thing. It's me and Jesus in my head. The antidote is what you're describing, which is communal Christianity. That's how it was understood historically. What is a civilization? What is a culture? You need more than one person. Okay, so this individualism business has really been very problematic and destructive on many levels of society, including for the individual. And yes, a return to the family as the core nucleus. And indeed, if a family of a child grows up seeing that sort of family virtue, then that always stays with him no matter what. And he can continue being a progenitor of that sort of thing. And like you said, it's a small, slow way, but it's still definitely better than the alternative.
I see. As for the present, do you see like Christianity already taking up space in politics, like returning to politics? Do you see it? Yeah, we are said that it's not about, you know, state mandate or anything.
Yes.
But do you see like political forces taking up the mantle of, you know, Christianity, or like using it as political tools?
I see two things. I see a pope that is very actively speaking into the political world in a very balanced way. I'm a great fan of his new encyclical on AI. That's a very, very intelligent and move. Also, if the document is rather long, yeah. And the other thing I see is that if more conservative parties grow stronger in Europe, and this is happening all over Europe, then usually with conservative parties come conservative values, family values, religious liberty, and all these topics, which had been pushed out of the Western European discourse for decades. Basically, we had an aggressive secular West, with conservative parties getting stronger in several countries in Western Europe. Along with this, topics that are important for Christians will be coming back. I believe that. And I mean, look at what, I mean, you can criticize the Orban government for many things, but it gave the Christian faiths, the churches, space in the public sphere. This is not something that happens in countries like France or so. But this will be stronger. I believe that conservative parties will bring back more visibility also of the Christian churches. So, yeah, I think in a way Christianity will enter the discourse a bit more. But most of all, as I said, we have a pope who is dialoguing with the greatest minds right now that we have in the world and with technology about AI. It is a moral voice. The leader of the Catholic Church is a moral voice that everybody listens to. You know, you don't have to read the entire document because the first half is a long description of social teaching of the church and its development. It's a bit long. The second half is all the consequences of AI, but in the middle there is 2 paragraphs where he speaks about the limits and the dangers of AI. And one of those paragraphs he posted on Twitter 2 days ago, and he has like 15 million views or so. That's a lot on Twitter. That's a lot. So you see, there is a discourse with a leader of the Catholic Church. That is, in my eyes, something good. Yeah.
What do you think, Raymond, about Christianity and politics like these days?
I think before we can, when you say that, I think most people will bristle. Oh, you can't bring Christianity into politics, and that again is the byproduct of the secularist way of thinking, which is antithetical to what we're trying to discuss here. And I think before any of that can be done or should be done, remember, bringing Christianity into politics is sort of redundant because the actual politics of Western civilization were built by Christian ethics. So they're already there to a certain degree. It doesn't need to be formalized with any outward wrapping necessarily. But I think the real issue right now is getting people to understand, or to put it differently, I think the biggest obstacle against what you're discussing, what we're discussing in general, is that there, and we have to acknowledge this, that there is a literal force that has done everything in its power to demonize Christianity in the eyes of Christians. And this is why, till today, if you find a young, let's say a young person who hears us, he may immediately, react, I don't want your religion, oh, Christianity is this. But then why does he have that idea? And then you find out because, well, every movie presents Christians in a very negative way. Any historical movie I watch that deals with the medieval era, okay, it portrays those guys, and the more religious they are, the more despicable they are. Always, yes. Okay? Always. And then the one good guy is going to be the guy who's like not religious and kind of secular and makes out with the girl, that guy. He's really the good guy. But you find out, if you read about those people, actually they were noble and honorable and charitable. They really were. And so there's this concerted effort to disassociate you and make you renounce your own heritage. And it's been very successful. And this is one of the reasons so many people in the West are self-hating and happy to accommodate Muslims or whoever, because it's from the moment they've been born, all these forces in the media, in the schools, in the history texts, have done everything to make them despise and it's all lies. And this is why I say this is all intentional. So there literally is a war, and you can see it as a spiritual or a real secular war on Christianity. And I think that's the first obstacle to remove. You have to first be cognizant of it and accept it. This isn't a conspiracy theory, it's a fact. Mm-hmm. And then it has to be dismantled just so people can have a true, honest understanding of what Christianity really is, including its historical manifestations. And if this were to happen, I believe that guy that I gave you as an example, the young guy who, if I said Christianity, he's going to be turned off, he's going to be the guy that wants to actually join it immediately, because it's not what they told him it was. They intentionally demonized it so he would just be jaundiced towards his own heritage. But if, and this is what I was saying about my books, which I didn't do this intentionally, but I just dig in the primary sources, and the response, especially from young men, is, yeah, I want to be a Christian. This is what I've been waiting for. I didn't want that other kind of Christianity. It just seemed weak and pathetic and meaningless, and it doesn't have anything. I want to die for Christ. I mean, they'll say things like that. So I think that's the first and most fundamental step is dismantling this really invasive kind of worldview that permeates everything from academia to the media to the commercials to the movies, and all of it is just concerted on demonizing Christianity. Once that's gone, I think people by nature will gravitate towards and want to, as you're saying, maybe even politicize Christianity.
Raymond, I have good news for you. I used to be a scriptwriter for 10 years before I worked for the bishop. So I know people in the media business, and I also know people in Hollywood, a few. For instance, I've been speaking to one of the actors in the new Mel Gibson Resurrection movie. And he told me that woke is dying in Hollywood. It's going to go away. We still don't see it because we still have the products of things that were produced a few years ago, but it's dying. And we'll have a new batch of films that show Christianity in a positive light. For instance, I've just been to Washington, D.C. to present a French movie about the Vendée. I don't know whether you know what the Vendée was. The Vendée was the uprising of the Catholic parts of France that stay loyal to the king after the French Revolution. They were brutally put down by the revolutionary regime in a barbaric way. But there is this French film with a very low budget made about this gathering coming together and trying to fight for their faith and for the king in the Vendée. And we've presented this film in the United States. It's beautiful. It's very realistic. It's very down to earth. It's very normal. People like you and me having to decide whether they want to lend their hand to something like that against enlightenment and revolution. And the people who watch it love it. And it's going to inspire people to say, I want to stand up for my faith. Because with today's Christianity, do you see yourself dying for your faith? Are you ready to give your life for God or for Christ? No, because well, perhaps some of us are, but it was far more normal in the past to know that this is part of your Christian testimony. In today's world, and we need inspiring stories, and I have a second story for you. A friend of mine is a director in Hollywood, and he was rather successful, and he told me that he sat in meetings for comedies or for thrillers. And at some point, there was always the question, are we going to have a scene in it where we ridiculize the Catholic Church? It sounds like a conspiracy theory, but he actually told me which film it was on and which producer said that. And if the director doesn't react, they don't do it. But if the director jumps on board, they will have a scene that makes the Christian faith look stupid. It's just part of the deal still, but it's going away. It's going to change. Because the young people don't want that anymore, is my impression.
But why has it been like that and for so long? What was the cause? Was this
story.
Organic? Was it by design or what?
I believe that this is a consequence of the entire march through the institutions that has been funded by communism through the 50s and 60s into the intellectual institutions, the Frankfurter Schule in Germany, and then into the American intellectual life, and from there into Hollywood. It was a march through the institutions. It was, I would say, up until a few years ago, 80% of all journalists in Western Europe would have put themselves left of the middle, critical and a bit anti-Christian. Now it's slowly changing, but this is still the reality. We're living in a world where the left and a criticism of the church is part of the normal savoir-vivre. That's a result of something that has happened several decades ago. It's going to change, but it's going to change slowly.
Thank you. Very exciting processes for Christianity, at least. And with this, we are opening the floor to questions. There are a couple. First, Peter.
Thank you very much. I'm Péter Szitas. I'm the Deputy Director of Research here at the Danube Institute. And let me ask you, my dear fellow colleagues, Edward, you have mentioned that you worked for a bishop in Austria as a speak person, and your primary job was to avoid, quote, a shitstorm. And my question with regard to this, why is that? So why is the motivation of today's church is to avoid storms? So when I think about the studies of mind regarding theology, so Jesus Christ was not the one who went on this road, and he was going into these storms. And what has changed since that? Thank you.
You want to collect questions, or would you answer them right away?
No, I think well,
Good for you.
I think that the Catholic Church, at least in Austria, is terrified of that because, as I said, you don't have very strong convictions. I don't think that many of these people who work for the Church have strong, devout convictions. They won't stand up for them, and they're terrified that the state would take away subsidies, that the state would punish them, would make life complicated for them, because, as we said before, the Church has become a good partner to the state, someone who helps to bring around a better society. You don't want to step out of the societal consensus. You want to be a force for the good, and that's a trap, as they say in Star Wars. It's a trap, and a trap that the churches have fallen into. And yes, I don't want to criticize the church too much because I worked for the church and I saw all what they're trying to do and all the good, but there was a terrible fear of making one wrong step. And it's true, we live in a time where one line said by you in the wrong moment is in Argentina 10 minutes later with a negative slant and will follow you forever. You will be known for that one line taken out of context. So people are terrified to speak up in the public. It's true. And the church is afraid of losing all the territory it has conquered vis-a-vis the state. At least that's how they imagine it. And therefore, I remember that when something happened in Austria, all the bishop speakers were looking to Vienna. And in Vienna, you had a Cat-Press, which is the Catholic press agency of the Austrian Bishops' Conference, and they debated, and then they handed out more or less how we should react to that. And yeah, that gives you an idea. Yeah.
Gentleman with the red shirt.
Yes, I'm Chris Herdel. I'm an art historian focusing on Christian iconography. My question, I start with the question. What would you say, how would you reply, what would you reply to your children, to your students, if they ask, what's the point about Jesus today? What is his importance? Yeah? This would be my question. My comment, I doubt there is a concrete unit of Christianity. Think about the huge fighting which went on for thousands of years, 2,000 of years almost. But also think about the influence other faith and civilization had on Christianity. Yeah? Neolithic female figurines end up in Virgin Mary, yeah? If you want to follow the line, yeah? Isis, yeah? Isis from Egypt, yeah? From Egypt, many elements.
We need to move the question to answer.
Okay, so the point is, my doubt is, I'm doubting that there is a compact unit of Christianity, and this is why we have to redefine, we have to come back to the bases which are understandable to, let's say, a larger part of the people. Yeah? Mm-hmm. But my question is, what would you say to your children, to your students, about the relevance of Jesus Christ today?
Thank you. Oh, that's a long one.
I think the thing about your question is it's exactly what we're talking about. That question would only exist in our current climate. if you go back in the previous centuries, we're talking about you would not have to be asked that question and you would not have to give an answer because it would have all been assumed. This is the byproduct of decades and generations of intentional skepticism being bombarded on people. And I know what you're talking about, the ICs and the Virgin Mary and all that sort of thing, which is ultimately theoretical. But obviously, as we can see, they've had their impact in creating doubt. And that's what I'm saying. In a previous generation, the family, the church, the unit would have been providing enough evidence that your mind would not go there. Your mind's going there now because that's where they wanted it to go. For the same reasons that I said, every movie, every book is all about trying to somehow strip Christianity of its, take it down from its pedestal. All those theories that you mentioned, which are mostly from the 19th and early 20th century, yes, we're part of that. So that's...
Can I say, I have to say, many of these ideas have been debunked, I believe. Yeah. That was ideas from the Golden Bow and from all these books of the 19th century. Yeah. I believe the Christian message is pretty simple. We believe that man is broken inside and has to be healed. He has been healed by the fact that God became a man and suffered the most horrible death to heal our wounds. And that's the basic message. There is no mysticism, no ISIS, there is no Neolithic dolmen in that. It's just, and if you ask a child in the year 1930, what's the meaning of your life? What are you there for on the earth? The answer would have been the first paragraph of each catechism. To know and to love God, to live your life with Him so you can be united one day with Him in heaven. That was what Christianity was all about. That's the first thing. Then, of course, to love your neighbor, as Christ said. But it was not mostly about creating a just and wonderful world and helping politics. It was about a personal journey towards God for each single one that will hopefully end one day in heaven with Him. That was the Christian faith was about.
Gentleman with the... yeah, sure. Right.
Thank you very much. I am a Christian journalist, thank God for that. I spent the last 2 weeks in Kyiv, in Ukraine. And currently in Ukraine, Russians, in the name of defending Christian civilization against Western secular values, are bombing families in the beds that they sleep in at night at their home. I toured a Catholic church that was hit by a Russian missile. And this is all happening in the name of defending Christian civilization against secular values. I would especially like to hear from the ambassador. Do you think that this is a moral strategy, a moral approach to defending Christian civilization?
I don't think that the aggression against Ukraine has been done in the name of defending Christianity. I don't think. Somebody may like to play that card from time to time, but I don't believe that even any Russian leader said that we do this in order to defend Christianity. What I believe is that this is a conflict about territories, something about Russian ideas of power, but it wasn't done in the name of religion. Perhaps sometimes Russian intellectuals or apologetics will use this. And of course, the Orthodox Church will lend itself to giving a sort of Christian blessing to what is going on in Kiev. But as Pope Leo will tell you, Catholic faith, Christian faith will never encourage war. The politic of the Vatican was to always immediately encourage to peace and to peace negotiations wherever possible. So I don't think you can nowadays and today use Christianity as an excuse for aggression. I don't think so. What do you think?
The only thing I could add, I agree with you, is just that there is a concept of just war, of course, where there is time for war and you could be a Christian and engage in warfare. But the example you gave of someone saying, I'm doing this because I'm a Christian, bombing a home or something of that sort, that's again, that's a very extreme, and I don't see why anyone would even think of it that way. And I also agree with you that they're not treating this as a religious holy war. This is a dispute over different matters, but there is room for religious just war theory in all contexts. There always has been. And so that's also important to keep in mind too.
Because if you don't believe in any kind of just war, then the landing in the Bretagne to stop Hitler's armies would not be just. On the other hand, I've spoken in the last days with many people who have read the passage of, I think, Leo XIV in the new encyclical, where he makes a critical remark about just war theory. And many of my more traditionally minded Catholic thinkers tell me we may have to rethink the idea of just war in the face of drones and other elements that have been added to. When Augustine and Thomas Aquinas developed their ideas about just war was something that you fought with knives and forks and swords among two armies on a field. What we have now may have to lead us to rethink whether a just war is even possible anymore. That's a new situation that we have, yeah.
Nuclear weapons.
Yes, nuclear weapons, and if you have thousands of drones that can, where do you begin to talk about, yeah.
Yeah, gentleman with the suit, and then Melissa, and then gentleman with.
Thank you. My name is Malin Akmat, and my question is: how do you say immigrants coming to the West who are strongly faithful Christians, even from Latin America, Africa, or Asia? How the Filipino workers brought their own priests to Hungary with them? And also, how do you see the rise of the traditional Latin Mass in the revival of Christianity? Thank you.
Well, about the last question, I've just written a book on it. So I could talk for about an hour now. I'm not going to. Please, could you once more say, what do you think about, what you want me to say, what I think about Christian migrants and Christian refugees coming to Europe and bringing their own priests and their own spirituality with them? I think that's something positive that you can incorporate into Europe and into a Christian Europe. That's a richness of faith.
It's better than bringing Muslim imams, right?
Yes. But quickly about the traditional Latin, what I said and what we both said over the last hour is focused in the point of the traditional Latin Mass. Liturgy went the same way as the church hierarchy went for a long time. And now you have the phenomenon of young people rediscovering liturgy in a far more conservative, deeply devout, traditional, in a different language, in Latin, with old, very, very beautiful gestures. Young people are flocking to that. The fact that you can see that is, if you look at the famous Chartres pilgrimage, which is going from Paris to Chartres on the Pentecost weekend, always. And there is, 3 years ago, it was 14,000 young people. This year, it was 20,000 young people walking for 3 days and having traditional Latin Mass on their way in tents, and then meeting in Chartres and having a huge traditional Latin Mass. Young people are flocking to this because they want the real serious faith. They want something they can build their lives upon, not a vaguely secular idea of being more or less the same as the state. So that is another point to what we've been saying for the last hour. Yeah.
Thank you. Melissa O'Sullivan with Danube Institute. It's a wonderful conversation, gentlemen. This question is for Edward. You're mentioning the worldview in Hollywood and the treatment of Christianity. In the Korean-produced romantic comedy and dramas, Christianity is portrayed very sympathetically. Female lead actors many times wear a cross. The priests are sympathetic characters they go to for advice. The Christian orphanages are places where the children are treated lovely. And my question is, do you have any idea as to why this is so, that in the South Korea, Christianity receives such a very sympathetic portrayal in popular culture?
Well, I'm of course not a specialist, but I'm aware that Christianity is something very present in South Korean society, and perhaps South Korea didn't go through the aggressions and intellectual turmoils that the West has been going in the last 50 years, and therefore there was no targeted aggressivity against Christian in the media. I don't know that. I don't know enough about the history of South Korea, but that might explain it. I don't know. Do you know anything? No? Sorry, please. Sorry. But he had a question up there first.
Thank you, gentlemen. My name is James. I work at a local international Christian school here in Budapest. We've talked a lot about institutions. Obviously, I have a stake in education. We're talking about the survival of the West and families. Where do you see education taking a place? Do you see it as, are the schools and universities going to be redeemable, or are we going to have to make alternative institutions ourselves, maybe even a Benedictine kind of situation? We talked about the Middle Ages in the earlier there. Where do you see the future of the education of our children in order to ensure the survival of the West?
Yeah, that's a great question, because that's where it all starts, education, which is nowadays indoctrination in all the problems that we just outlined today. And yeah, they are pretty rife in the, I'm speaking from an American context, and public school system, from, as they call it, K to 12, kindergarten and the 12th grade, and then in college, especially in the humanities and the soft sciences. Really, it's an indoctrination, and a lot of people, myself included, think that it's better sometimes for young men, especially, to get into a trade than to pay that high bill, and you come out as a wokey and an indoctrinated. Because that's really what happens. And I've met many people who've had this experience where their child, they send them off to Berkeley, of all places, and then 4 years later, he or she comes back with blue hair and interesting ideas. So I don't know if they're necessarily redeemable, or if they can. If they are, it would be a slow process. But I think the best thing right now is what a lot of parents are instinctively doing, which is homeschooling their kids, at least by putting in the basics, because the most important actual schooling, honestly, is when they're very young. And then if you can get them then and put some common sense in their heads, then they may be able to navigate college. And, like me, I went to college, I was around that sort of thing, but it was just entertaining. That's it. It didn't have a delirious impact on my brain.
Yes, guilty, Your Honor. We homeschooled 4 of our children over the last years, and through them receiving Christian homeschooling, I got catechism through my children, because I had to ask them the question. What I just quoted to you from the Baltimore Catechism, I learned because my children learned it. I never heard that in my life before. So yes, Catholic or Christian education is an incredibly important tool, and there will be places where this will be offered, because the demand will rise of people for Christian education, and it will rise over the next years. I'm very hopeful.
We have time for one more question.
Thank you so much. I'm Gellert Dornay, a Hungarian-American, and I am rebuilding Christendom. Yay. I have 11 children, and my wife has homeschooled for 30 years, actively building a traditional Benedictine monastery and a traditional Carmelite convent, and helping build a network of Catholic classical high schools called Chesterton Academy. We have 100 of them open or opening soon across the world. Raymond, I have a question for you. I've read some of your work. It's fantastic. Thank you for giving us a true view of history. You mentioned the challenge of integrating Islam into Christian communities. My understanding is the number of Christians in the Holy Land has declined quite a bit over the last 70 years. What's the opportunity for cohabitating with the new state there?
The new state?
Israel.
Oh. Oh, you mean how fare Christians in Israel?
Is there an opportunity for them to live together and rebuild Christendom?
Well, I don't know if the Israelis want to rebuild Christendom. There's a contradiction there, obviously, of interest. But the Christians of the Holy Land, and I don't know if you mean particularly the Holy Land or the Middle East in general, have had their issues with Muslims, and increasingly with what we're seeing also at the hands of the Israeli army as well. So it's interesting because a lot could be done for these communities. If we went back to the mentality that we were discussing historically, well, historically Christians went to war to help those exact same Christians. And this goes back to what I was saying, where, you know, medieval Christians were weak and yet they succeeded, whereas we are strong and we can't even do anything. Bottom line is we have the resources, the West does, where we don't have to bomb anyone, and we could actually alleviate the life for those very same Christians that you're mentioning. Just things like, you know, minor, in all the money, all the billions that the U.S. gives to these countries, one of the conditions can be, yeah, treat these people civilly. And it will happen, actually, because where money is, they're not going to jeopardize that. And the U.S. already gives billions, let's say, to Egypt. All they have to do is say part of these billions is also let these guys have churches. They'll do it, you know, but the U.S. doesn't do that. And so that goes back to my point where the West is so powerful, has all the resources, and the smallest thing it could do, which would be beneficial to fellow Christians, it doesn't do. And often actually implements policies that is to their detriment.
And just as a little final thought, that's what Hungary Help has been doing for the last years, until it now has shut down shop, if I understood correctly.
And yeah, and that was our discussion about the place of the Christianity in the survival of the West. And please join me in a round of applause for our wonderful speakers.